A common household plant could be killing your beloved pet, and we uncover a dark secret about Texas wine. That and more coming up on Studio A. Welcome to Studio A. My name is Jonathan Borzjani. We're here with Candace Evans, Jeffrey Hald, PJ Taberge, and Imani Forrest. We're going to start off with Candace. She learned about a plant that could be putting your pet at serious risk. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So this plant, it's a sago palm plant, but it is a very common household plant that owners don't realize if their pet gets in contact with this or ingests any part of it, it can cause them to be severely sick or even cause their death. So it's pretty important that they're aware of it.
Wow, let's take a look.
Maddie Milner's dog Foxy was playful and energetic, then suddenly Foxy stopped acting like her normal self.
She decided to start acting lethargic. She couldn't move, she was a little bit paralyzed.
Unbeknownst to Milner, Foxy had ingested parts of a sago palm plant Milner had in her backyard. The plant is widespread across Texas and much of the South and Southwest because it thrives in a warm, dry climate. Sago palm is highly toxic to dogs and cats.
Vomiting, or they'll be listless. They may have yellow gums or yellow eyes, and that's our first indicator that they may have eaten sago palm.
The symptoms are a result of liver damage caused by a toxin called capsaicin, which is found in sago palm. The poisoning is swift and can be fatal.
Is after animal has eaten this toxic compound, and then they really start displaying the bad symptoms, and that's usually, unfortunately, once they start displaying these bad symptoms, is whenever their prognosis or how well they're going to be treated actually gets worse.
The sago palm tree plant is highly toxic. It only takes a handful of its seeds to cause your pets to be severely sick or even cause death.
We have seen a few sago palms or suspected sago palms and have treated them, and they've come out clinically okay. But I definitely have colleagues that have had their dogs die that they've treated.
Luckily for Maddie, her dog pulled through after spending thousands of dollars on treatment.
She was totally fine. She jumps up and down. Sometimes we'll have to go slower, but typically she's okay.
If you suspect your pet has come in contact with a sago palm, call the Animal Poison Control Center and contact your veterinarian immediately.
Wow, that is really good information. I'm going to keep my miniature dachshund away from all household plants.
That's a good idea.
So I was wondering, whenever you talk to that vet, did they tell you that this is an increasing risk?
So maybe not at the practice she was at, but at emergency clinics it seems to be an increasing cases that they're getting about this or suspecting that it's caused by sago palm. At family vets is not as common. It does happen, but it is recommended though to go to an emergency clinic first to get the treatment because they tend to have more resources than your family vet might to treat it.
So is this harmful to only dogs and cats, or is it harmful to humans as well?
It's actually harmful to all animals, including humans. So yeah, do not suggest probably not having it. I mean, if you want it, just don't ingest it. Their seeds themselves is like the equivalent of ingesting cyanide. So
Wow.
it's very risky to have around. It is toxic for humans. Kids definitely want to get them away from that because that could harm them.
So is it just ingestion, or will physical contact cause a reaction as well?
It's just ingestion. So coming in contact, you won't brush up against it, nothing will happen if that, but if you do, chew on the leaf, anything, just don't put your mouth on it, basically, just to keep yourself safe and your pet safe.
Thanks for telling us about that, Candace.
Of course.
Now I'm going to change the topic from one Texas plant to another, grapes. So PJ, if I understand correctly, you found something out about Texas wine that we might find a little bit troubling.
Yeah. So something about Texans that I maybe we're all as Texans sort of admire is that Texans are reverent about things that are Texas. So if something says, oh, it's from Texas, it better be from Texas, or typically you're going to find consumers sort of outrage. And that's sort of what's happening with the Texas wine industry. A lot of the grapes are shipped in from other states or from Canada or wherever else, but because of a federal regulation, they're allowed to call it 100% Texas wine.
Okay, well, let's take a look at what PJ found out.
At William Chris Vineyards in High Texas, what you see is what you get. The wine produced here is 100% sourced from Texas, meaning the grapes are grown in Texas soil. But William Chris Vineyards co-owner Chris Brundrett says not all Texas wines are as they seem. and for him, that's a big problem.
I got dirt under my fingernails. We're farmers. We're growing wine, and I think that it takes away from what we do. It's the state's obligation, it's the people's obligation to farmers to actually know that when it says Texas, it actually means Texas.
Simply put, the Texas wine you're drinking doesn't legally have to be grown in Texas to call itself Texas wine. At least not all of it. Only 75% of the grapes that contribute to a wine's makeup have to be grown in Texas in order for winemakers to use that Texas wine label.
You know, they depend on the consumer to not be smart enough or to not be inquisitive enough to ask. And then even then sometimes the answer you get might not be the truth. And that's unfortunate, I think.
So despite the best efforts of Chris and several other wine growers in the Texas area, there are still loads of distributors and consumers who have no idea that the fight over Texas labeling is even taking place.
I do think it's difficult, being a fairly young industry here, to be able to have a variety of wines and to be able to service our customers with a variety of wines if they are just local grapes.
Many Texas wineries source their grapes from California because Texas weather can be unpredictable and extreme. However, according to Texas Wine and Trail magazine, the total vineyard acreage in Texas is growing by 10% each year. It's a sign that more Texas wines could contain more Texas grapes in the future, but until then, Brodrett says he'll remain on his crusade to change the status quo.
We're right at that tipping point, and if the consumers, if the wineries, if the growers push hard enough, we're going to continue something really, really special.
How peculiar. All right, so I'm wondering, why don't they just admit the grapes aren't from Texas?
Legally speaking, they don't have to admit it. As long as there's 75% of the grapes in the bottle are grown from Texas, this is the federal regulation and the state regulation which follows. As long as it's 75%, they can say, yeah, it's grown in Texas. The other 25 could be from Canada, could be from Venezuela, Argentina, Canada, it doesn't matter. California, whatever. It's the federal regulation says 75, so Texas follows along with that. Other states like California have gone ahead and done the 100%. France, for instance, does 100%. If it's from France, it has to be 100% grown there.
Is that not illegal for Texas to do that?
I mean, that's what the fight is about right now, is they're trying to make it so that it's what's called truth in labeling. If you're calling it Texas, make it be from Texas. That's what Texans want a lot of times. You want something from Texas.
So how do we find out if it's a true Texas wine that we're drinking?
I mean, push your server. You know, if you're there at a tasting room, you're trying wine, and ask where it's from. If it doesn't seem like they know, or if they don't seem confident in their answer, ask to speak to the wine grower or the tasting room manager or anything. You can always be a little pushier because you're spending $40, $60, $140 on a bottle of wine. Be sure you're getting what you think you're getting.
For sure. Like, it's just really frustrating hearing this because I love buying Texas, authentic Texas things. So hearing this really makes me upset. Has anyone ever confronted this or complained, like, as far as a consumer's point?
Yeah, so actually Chris, who was in the store, he told me he will have customers come up the wine trail into High and come into William Chris and say, hey Chris, you know, come look at my wine stash, all the stuff I got from Texas. And Chris will go out and they'll open the trunk and he'll look and say, well, this one and this one are from Texas. But all those have Canadian grapes or California grapes. And you can imagine the person's surprise at thinking they've got this great haul of Texas wine and half of it's not even.
That's so frustrating.
Well, I'm glad I know about that now. I want to switch gears here and talk about transportation. Something new has been adopted by Texas State. And Amani has done some information about this new program. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, of course. So Texas State is just starting a new system, a bus system, where they're going to start shuttling students and faculty and staff home to Dallas and Houston, wherever really they're from, if they can get a stop there, because they've started to realize the problem with not providing that service. So,
all right, let's take a look at what you figured out.
Texas is a big place, and San Marcos can be far from where many students call home. That means for these students, getting home can be difficult or expensive, especially if they don't have a car on campus. However, students now have a new way to make a quick trip home on the weekends. The Kerrville Bus Company has introduced a new service to help those students get home more often.
If you go round trip here, it's $40 cheaper, and it's right here at school, and so I don't have a car, so I would have to rely on somebody else to take me.
So, for just a $10 fare per way, students who don't have a vehicle to get themselves home for the weekend now have a solution to being homesick an entire semester.
The buses pick up students at the LBJ Student Center on Friday evenings and return to San Marcos on Sunday nights. Right now, the routes run to and from Houston, Katy, Waco, and the Dallas Grand Prairie area.
It's open to any student, faculty, or staff, or parent that wants to ride that service as part of the Texas State family.
Tickets for the weekend trips can be purchased on the Kerrville Bus Company website, iridekbc.com.
After watching that story, I'm left with a question because I know that I'm late sometimes, and so are a lot of other students. What happens if you miss the bus?
Well, if you're at home and you miss the bus coming back to school, unfortunately, you now have to find your own way. That's why they're trying to do this transportation, because a lot of people can't. So let's try not to do that, because they're not going to turn around.
Oh my gosh, those poor kids.
I know.
That would be horrible. So is this intended to be permanent? Is it long term? Do you have any idea?
I know that right now it's a pilot program, which means that they're trying to test it out to see if the market's really going to jump on this opportunity. I know that it's doing really well right now, but because the summer's coming up, it's only for this semester. They're going to kind of see if the stops that they've put in place are the ones that they really need, if demand is elsewhere. So yeah, right now it's temporary, but hopefully it'll be permanent soon.
Makes sense.
Now, are we the only school that has this kind of service?
The only one through the Kerrville bus system, yes. But other schools do have, their own local systems that will provide a similar transportation back home and shuttle people where they need to go.
Thanks for telling us about that, Imani. I'm going to transfer now from one transportation story to another. Jeffrey, if I understand correctly, you have some information that is going to come out in a story on April 1st, telling us about the Loop 82 project.
Yeah, so the Loop 82 project is actually going to be pretty cool when it's done. It's actually an overpass that's being built right now, right on Ocarina Springs Drive. Basically, it's going to alleviate traffic problems right around the 5 o'clock time, right next to the train tracks. Mm-hmm. And until then, we're going to have some problems in traffic.
Oh, gosh.
Definitely an important story. Well, that's our show. I want to say thank you to Candace, Jeffrey, PJ, and Imani. My name's Jonathan Borzjani. We will be back on March 25th. You can find our YouTube channel. We'll have all of our shows, including this one. So please check it out and have an excellent spring break.